Friends, welcome to the Pints with Jack Skype Sessions. And so for people who are here who listened to our last ones, this is the first time we're calling it Skype Sessions. Actually,
Indeed.
live, which David came up with that name. We were calling it video series. I really love this new name, the Skype Sessions. But this is going to be where we dive into a specific topic that really jumped out to us on the podcast. And we wanted to use this as an opportunity to expand on that topic and to have more of a free-flowing conversation, even though this is take two.
Or three.
Although I cut it well before we got into any of the meats. Matt just is getting familiar with the introduction stuff right now. But today we are going to be talking about longing, and particularly longing in its role in our spiritual journey, because we see longing frequently in Lewis's works. We see it in his life. He wrote about it in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy. And we also are seeing it very frequently in one of the main characters of Till We Have Faces, which is the book we're going through in the podcast. So if you don't subscribe to that, go there. That's our primary format. This is more supplemental. But before we dive in, David, thanks for joining me. And cheers as we drink some scotch.
And some tea.
Oh, you've got tea. Nice. Should you do a little plug here for that? I saw there's an image on there that's of a other podcast.
Yes, go listen to Talking Beasts. They're great. And they also foolishly had me on their show recently. So
I wanted to give them a chance.
They're really getting desperate for guests.
David, what does that say about me? I have you as a guest every week on this.
No, I have you as a guest.
That's the podcast. This is my chance. You're right, but this is my chance for you to make me feel like I am no longer the guest.
You're great, Matt.
Oh, thanks so
now
much,
get on
David.
with it. Get on with it. I want to go home.
So to set this up, though, Until We Have Faces, not going to go into detail, but there's the two main characters, Psyche and Orwell. And this is a scene where Psyche is going to be going to her death, a very sacrificial death that she's not freely choosing, but she's willingly submitting to. And there's a few quotes that I want to read that really highlight this role of longing. And that's what we're going to unpack. So she says, "The sweetest thing in all my life has been the longing to reach the mountain, to find the place where all beauty came from." Right there's a lot there, but hold your thoughts. She also says, "My country, the place where I ought to have been born. Do you think all it meant nothing, all the longing for home? For indeed it now feels not like going, but like going back. All my life the god of the mountain has been wooing me. I am going to my lover." There's a lot here. And so we've been talking about longing. I've been using this word. So I want us to start by defining what you believe Lewis means by longing.
I think it's the searching in our heart for something, even if we're not even entirely sure what that something is. When we're hungry, we're longing for food because we know it will satisfy us. When we're homesick, we want to go home because we know that when we're back, we'll feel safe and all will be well again. So I think when we're longing for something, we're longing for a particular object that we don't have, and that we know that when we have it, life will be better. The Augustinian idea of this is, "You made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts wander restless until we rest in you." And ultimately, the answer from the Christian is that we're all ultimately longing for God.
I like that. I was thinking as well here that it's a longing for beauty. Because go ahead.
I think that's definitely the thing that tips Psyche off. That's the signpost that she sees that points to another reality. She's experienced some beauty. She wants more beauty. She knows that there has to be more. She knows that her heart was made for more beauty, and that leads her to go looking for it. And I'd say it's true for all of the transcendentals, for truth, goodness, and beauty. We're never satisfied with just a little bit of it. We always want more of it.
And why do you think this is so important for C.S. Lewis?
Well, this was central to his own journey. I mean, in his own path towards Christianity, there was an analytical, theological, philosophical reasoning, rigorous reasoning that ultimately led him to reject atheism and embrace theism. But behind it all, there was this hunger for God. He had experienced these stabs of joy throughout his life, and he wanted more of it. And more importantly, he wanted to know the source of this joy.
And we've somewhat already hit on this and alluded to it. But just to make it clear, why do you believe we have this longing?
Because God placed it in our hearts. Because we know what God made us for himself. Lewis, in Mere Christianity, talks about it's like gasoline for a car. It was what it was made to run on. And the Christian conception of the world is that God made us to run on himself. Therefore, we can't have any true joy, long-lasting happiness, unless God is involved in that. And in this world, in this life, we experience glimpses of that full glory, of that full beauty and love. And this is what causes us to push on towards the goal that will ultimately be satisfied when we're with God for all eternity in heaven.
You said this is what caused us to push on. I would say that's what it's supposed to cause us to do. But in a lot of circumstances, many of us don't respond that way. And so I'm curious, let's talk about some of the negative ways people respond to that. Because we have this longing, we have this, some people call it this God-shaped hole inside of us. And as you've already alluded to Augustine, the way to satisfy that is through our Heavenly Father, because we were made for him. But we're painting the right picture here. In reality, many of us turn to many other things. I did this in my own life. I have my own experience of turning to the world. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, what are some very classic things that people attempt to fill this longing with?
Well, money, sex, and power are usually pretty popular.
What does Bishop Barron say? He has 4. Do you remember what those are? It's like honor, wealth, pleasure. Oh, it's honor, wealth, pleasure, power. Yeah, I think those are his 4. He says those are the 4 things that we tend to turn to.
Mm-hmm. And we'll often try and get as close as we can to the divine. I mean, that's one of the reasons why people often try and replace the God-shaped hole in their heart with a spouse. Because eros, when romance and love, is very similar to divine love. It's not quite the same, but it can make a pretty effective substitute, at least in the short term.
That's a really good point, because this is, Augustine talks about this a lot, how our sinful behaviors are typically us actually searching for a good in the wrong way, at the wrong time, to the wrong degree. And so we're always searching to fill this longing. And we're actually doing it. You gave a good example. You're searching for it in your spouse. And that's not necessarily sinful per se. But if that becomes your God, if you raise that up, it can prevent you from actually turning to God. That's more of a good one, but there are many other ways too. Someone who is going out and sleeping around, let's say, you're not married and you're engaging in premarital sex quite frequently. There, you're searching for a good. You're searching for intimacy. You're searching for intimacy with another. Ultimately, you're genuinely searching for intimacy with God, but you don't realize that you're expressing it in the wrong way because the world told you this is going to satisfy that need. And that's really helped me in my own journey, not only, I don't want to say have too much grace on myself, but to say, okay, here's an example, Matt, where you are turning away from God, but this is what you're really searching for. But also grace for others around me, because when you see someone sinning, the question I always ask myself is, what are they really longing for? What is that action they're doing trying to fulfill? And then that gives you a chance to don't judge them, but to possibly offer them the actual solution to what they're longing for.
And you can affirm the good. Yeah, there's a
Yes.
reason that we chase after beautiful things to try and fill the God-shaped hole. It's because they are good. The thing is, the only problem is we're trying to use them as an ultimate end, and they were never meant to be able to do that, because there's only one that can possibly do that.
Bishop Barron does that so well, by the way. He always affirms the good first. And that is a really good life lesson. I'm really glad you brought that up. And start with that with someone that you see that's in a state of sin. First of all, start with yourself, because we are all in a state of sin. So you got to be careful. Don't just be like, oh, yeah, let's go look at everyone else. But you will constantly encounter your friends and your loved ones living in a way that is incorrect, in the same way you encounter yourself. First thing you do, affirm the good. I would say second, I'm literally making this up off the top of my head, but identify what's the true thing you're longing for. And then 3, present that. Nowhere in there are you actually criticizing the sin, but you're quickly turning the sin into something good.
Or revealing the sin to be a signpost.
Yes.
In the same way that Psyche encountered some beauty and knew that it was pointing somewhere else, it's the same with all of these other goods when we try and set them up to give us more than they're actually capable of giving. Part of discovering God is seeing them as signposts that are pointing us to a deeper need and a deeper desire and a deeper longing in our hearts.
All right, so we have this longing. We've talked about it. We've talked about some negative ways that it can be distorted. We've already alluded to the positive ways of it's pointing to God. But I'm curious in your own life, David. You have this longing as much as anyone else. I have this longing. You've just told us our job is to fulfill this longing with God. But what does that look like on a practical way, on a daily basis? What does that look like for David Bates? What does that look like for Matt Bush to fulfill that longing with God? Does it just mean, oh, hey, God, thanks, come into me? Or is there more you're doing?
I think what it ultimately means is that God is first. When Jesus said, you can't come after me unless you hate mother, father, sister, brother, he doesn't actually really mean hate. He means you need to put me first. That it was one of the songs I used to sing at my old church, Jesus be first in my heart. And it's a life that is ordered as a result of that, allowing God's agape love to order all of your other loves, to put them in their correct place, and also to cleanse them and elevate them so that they can be all that they can be. So I'd simply say, look at your bank balance, look at your calendar, look at your internal thoughts. Are all of these, if somebody else looked at them, could they clearly discern from it that Jesus was first in your life?
I love that. Look at your bank balance, look at your calendar. How much time are you spending with him? How much time are you giving him? Are you building your day around him? Are you building him around your day? Are you building your budget around his kingdom? Or are you building his kingdom around your budget? That is fantastic, David. Well, I think on that note, we sign off. So thanks for joining me for another Skype Sessions.
You're welcome. Cheers.
Cheers.